When I was graduating from high school and people were talking to me about careers, not a single person asked me if I wanted to be an influencer. I'm not sure if anyone here got asked that question. John, were you ever asked? No? You don't? It's influence. Yeah. It is a reality that is now a profession. I still don't quite understand that, but that's all right. It's not my generation. There are folks out there. Who knows? Gavin, do you think you might be a social media influencer by career? One of these? No. How about you, AJ? You going to be a social media influencer? No, maybe not. Did you? That's all right. Yeah. You going to be a social media influencer when you grow up? No. Okay. How about you? You going to be a social media? No. All right. We've got no future social media influencers in this crowd, except maybe Ann. I think. You will? Okay. Aiden's going to do it. He's going to lead the way for us. The rest of us will not be that. It's weird to me that that's a profession. The fact that it's weird to me says nothing other than that I'm getting old. But the simple reality is the question of whether we're going to be an influencer or whether we're just going to be influenced is something that every single one of us has to wrestle with and deal with. And it's not a question that stops. It's true wherever we go, ongoing. It's a renewed question that we have to keep asking ourselves, are we going to be an influencer or just influenced? And I think there are some respects is that this is one of the often untalked about aspects of the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And particularly of Lot's role and place in all of that. If you recall, Lot and Abram were fighting over land for grazing flocks. And Abram gave Lot the choice. Lot decided to go to the Jordan Valley and pitch his tent near Sodom. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot moved among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. When he did that, Lot could have gone in with a particular mindset. The mindset could have been, you know what? I know there's a lot of things going on down in Sodom, that there's a lot of wealth, but there's also a tremendous amount of indifference to the poor and the needy. And even though they're very, very prosperous, they do nothing to care for the vulnerable among them. That's a problem. But because I've heard from Abram then at that point, I've heard from Abram, and I've traveled with him. We left our homeland because God promised Abram to take him to a land that he would show him. And God did. And God told Abram that all the nations of the world would be blessed through him. And I'm part of that promise. And I've seen it work because, not at that point because he hadn't been captured, but he eventually did see it work. And he could have gone down to the Jordan Valley and said, you know what? God has shown himself to be powerful. God has shown himself to be faithful. I want to, as much as I am able, influence folks around me to faithfully follow God in return, to live their lives God's way, including sharing the good things God has blessed us with, being a blessing to others. That's the essence in some respects of God's promise to Abram, that his life is about being a blessing to others, not just accumulating blessings for himself. That could have been Lot's mindset. If it was Lot's mindset, we have absolutely no evidence of it. What we do know is this, that Lot failed to influence his community or his family as he lived first in the plains of Jordan near Sodom and then in Sodom. He became a leader in the city. He was a judge in the city. That's why he was at the gate. That's what the leaders did. They stayed at the city gates. They welcomed guests. They resolved disputes that people would bring to them. When multiple leaders gathered, they would make decisions. And that's what Lot became, a leader in the city of Sodom. And yet failed to have any real impact or influence for good in that city. And not just in the community, but in his family as well. So let's talk about family first, because that's where influence starts, is how do we impact our family and the folks around us. And there's Lot. His family was small. His wife, they had two daughters, and they had two sons-in-law. They weren't married yet, but engagement, what we call engagement now, the promise to be married, was a much more formal relationship in that part of the world in those days. So that's why they can say that they were his sons-in-law, even though his daughters were not yet married to them. But very close. Their families had already started the important process of uniting. And when the angels told Lot, God's going to wipe this whole area out. If you've got any family here, go tell them so they can get out too. And he goes to his sons-in-law, and they laugh at him. It's a joke to them. This is crazy. Whatever Lot may or may not have told them about God, and by this time, Lot had seen it firsthand when his whole family was taken as political prisoners. And God, through Abram, set them free from that and brought them safely back to their homes. But they laughed at him. They thought he was a joke. When they're fleeing, and now it's just Lot and his wife and his two daughters. They're fleeing, they're getting to the mountains, they're turning back. They're getting to the mountains, the destruction is happening behind them. And Lot's wife turns back. And this is more than she just turned around to take a look. The implication there in that is that she was yearning to go back. That she didn't want to lose the life she had there. In this corrupt civilization, which was so intent on the wealthy being wealthy, but so indifferent toward the needs of the vulnerable among them. And that's the life she wanted. That's the life. She was already missing that life. And then they get into the mountains, and now it's just Lot and his daughters, and they're the only ones left, and they don't have their husbands anymore. They've been killed in the destruction, and they don't have their mom anymore, and so they do unspeakable things to their dad so that they can have children of their own. Lot had no influence for the good on anyone as far as we can tell. It seems that instead of Lot influencing his family, that his family simply adopted the culture that they were in, the culture that was around them. Get what you can for yourself. Who cares about others? Lot had no influence. No influence in the community, no influence with his family. And why was that? I think it's because of the reasons why Lot went there to begin with. Lot was negatively influenced because he was focused on the wrong thing. You remember why Lot went to the Jordan Valley, why he pitched his tent near Sodom? Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan towards Zoar was well watered. It's like the garden of the Lord, like the Garden of Eden, like the land of Egypt, the most prosperous nation in the world. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out to go east. Lot went to the Jordan Valley. Lot went to Sodom because he wanted to get in on the prosperity that was already there. He didn't go to be a blessing. He went to get a blessing, to get something for himself. He was chasing wealth. He was chasing status. He was chasing prosperity. And so instead of going to that area and saying, how can I be a blessing here? He went to that area because he wanted the blessing of that stuff. He wanted to get in on the wealth too. And because of that, instead of influencing the people around him, he just adopted the culture. He was influenced by the people around him. Let's get a counter example here. Anyone know the name Eric Liddell? Do you know that? Anyone know that name? I've had one person. I do. If you like old sports movies, there's a movie from the 70s called Chariots of Fire, which in my humble opinion, one of the greatest sports movies ever made, one of the greatest movies ever made. That's just my opinion. That's not a thus saith the Lord thing. It's a true story and Eric Liddell is one of the main characters in the movie. Eric Liddell, at the opening of the movie, he is in university, and this is in the 1920s. He's in the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, training to be a missionary to China. but he's also a tremendous athlete. And he's played in multiple games for the Scottish national rugby team, and he's very fast, and he competes in track and field, and he's very successful. He's so successful that he makes it on to the British Olympic team for the 1924 Olympics that will be held in Paris. Now, his sister and some of his friends are very disturbed by Eric's, what they see as obsession with sports. And they believe he's being distracted, that he's losing his focus, that he should be focusing on his mission work, not on these silly games, and not on the glory and the fame and the publicity and the status and the position that can come from being a successful athlete even then, even at that time. But Eric assures them that he hasn't lost his focus. They're not so sure. But the test comes after he makes the team. They're actually traveling to Paris by ship when the word comes out. Eric qualified to compete in the 100-meter dash. That's what he's going to be competing in. The only event he's scheduled to compete in, the 100-meter dash. And they find out on the ship on the way there that one of the preliminary heats for the 100-meter dash is on a Sunday. And one of the key tenets in Eric's, tradition of Christianity is observing the Sabbath. And you don't do anything but worship and spend time with family on the Sabbath. Nothing else. And so here's the test. Is Eric going to be an influencer, or will he be influenced? And he declares at that point that he will not compete on the Sabbath, and therefore he has to withdraw from the 100-meter dash. He was one of the favorites. This does not go over well with the British and the leaders of the Olympic team. And they bring Eric in to have a discussion with him, to browbeat him. And they use all of the power at their disposal. High-ranking people of wealth and position, authority, including the Prince of Wales, the Crown Prince of England, is there to persuade Eric to compete for the sake of national honor and dignity. We're going to watch a slide. We might need to restart this. It's pretty quiet. You might need to push up the volume a little bit above normal for us to hear this, particularly at the beginning. So let's watch this conversation.
Lord Birkenhead has advised us as to your attitude towards your participation in the 100 meters heats. Or would your non-participation be more accurate?
It would, sir, yes.
We were also consulted as to the correct manner in which to approach the French.
Something we just can't allow to happen. Going cap in hand to the frogs, of all people. Simply out of the question.
Simple matter of national dignity, Little. Being a patriot, I'm sure you understand.
Well, I must say, sir, I felt it was an impractical suggestion from the start.
Well, why did you say so, man? As an athlete, you value economy of effort.
I wanted to run. And I was desperate enough to try anything.
Well, all that being understood, we decided to invite you in for a little chat to see if there's any way that we can help resolve the situation.
There's only one way to resolve the situation. That's for this man to change his mind and run.
Don't state the obvious, Cadogan. We've to explore ways in which we can help this young man to reach that decision.
I'm afraid there are no ways, sir. I won't run on the Sabbath, and that's final. I intended to confirm this with Lord Birkenhead tonight. Even before you called me up in front of this inquisition of yours.
Don't be impertinent, Little.
The impertinence lies, sir, with those who seek to influence a man to deny his beliefs.
On the contrary, Little, we're appealing to your beliefs in your country and your king. Your loyalty to them.
Hear, hear. In my day, it was king first, God after.
Yes, and the war to end wars bitterly proved your point.
God made countries. God makes kings and the rules by which they govern. And those rules say that the Sabbath is his. And I, for one, intend to keep it that way.
Mr. Little, you're a child of your race, as I am. We share a common heritage, a common bond, a common loyalty. There are times when we're asked to make sacrifices in the name of that loyalty. Without them, our allegiance is worthless. As I see it, for you, this is such a time.
Sir, God knows I love my country. But I can't make that sacrifice.
And Eric didn't make that sacrifice. He chose not to run. Now, what happened was really kind of cool. One of Eric's teammates, who had qualified in 2 events and already medaled in one of them, gave up his spot in the 400 meters so Eric could run in the 400 meters instead, which did not have a heat on Sunday. And Eric ended up winning gold medal. Rather extraordinary story if you stop there, which is where the movie stops. But when you also add in the next year, 1925, Eric left England and went to China as a missionary, where he spent the rest of his life, which turned out to only be 20 years, where he had a tremendous impact, not in terms of mass conversions, but in terms of influence in individual people's lives. He was there in China when World War II started. He was there in China when the Japanese arrived. And he, along with many Chinese, was placed into a prison camp. Not a good place to be. And while Eric was in the prison camp, do you know what he was doing? He was playing rugby when he could. He was teaching Bible studies. He was preaching. When there wasn't enough food, he gave his food to people that were hungrier than he was. When there wasn't enough medicine, he gave his medicine to people who were sicker than he was. And before the war ended, he died in that camp. Polar opposite of Lot. Eric Lot focused on prosperity. What can I get for myself? How can I improve my position, my status, my privilege, my place in society? And Eric Liddell, how can I be a blessing to others? How can I serve others? How can I lift up others? One of them was influenced and shaped and became just like the culture in which they lived. The other influenced those around him without cutting himself off from the culture in which he lived. Lot's failure was huge on both a horizontal and a vertical level. Horizontal level, we've already talked about that. Everyone that he knew was either destroyed physically, died in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, or were so shaped by the culture of that place that it destroyed them as people, particularly thinking of his daughters here and himself in many respects. But vertically as well, because the children that his daughters had, that were also his children, ended up leading 2 of the nations that violently opposed the Israelites as they left slavery in Egypt and were returning to the promised land. They stood in their way and did everything they could to prevent them from receiving the blessing that God had for them. Hundreds of years after Lot's failure to influence, his decisions were still having a negative impact. This question is important for the same reasons for us, because our ability to influence or our capacity to be influenced will have positive or negative consequences, not just around us now, but for generations to come. So let's talk about that, some of the practical implications here. Because chances are, none of us is going to compete in the Olympics. Probably. Chances are, none of us is going to die in a prison camp in a foreign land. Chances are. So what does all of this have to do with us? What does all of this have to do with us? It has to do with this. We need to be aware in our own daily lives of our own limits, including our capacity to influence. Maybe the best decision Lot could have made in his entire life was when Abram said, "You pick where to live," if Lot had said, "You know what? I really like what's happening down there in the Jordan Valley. I like it so much, I don't think it's a good idea for me to go there." Even if I want to influence them, I don't think I have that in me to do that. To recognize our own limits. Because for all of us, there are places where we can be of influence and there are places where we can't. Two simple examples to illustrate this. If someone's 2 years sober from alcoholism, the bar is probably not your mission field, right? Because you go there, there's a good chance you're just going to go back to doing the stuff that made you in such a bad position to begin with. Guys I worked with so often, well, girls and guys, at the juvenile detention center in Seneca County when I lived up there, just were repeated examples of this. They would come into jail, they would swear off everything, they were determined they were going to do life better after they got out, so they would never have to come back to jail. They were, some of them didn't care, but a lot of them were absolutely serious. They would leave, and 6 to 12 months later, they were back. And I would say, what happened? And their story inevitably, like 9 times out of 10, was something like, well, I got to hanging out with my old friends again. First, I wasn't going to, but I went to hang out with them. I was like, I'm going to hang out with them, but I'm not going to do the stuff that they're doing. And they hang out with them, and they started to, they were, they're passing a joint, but I'll just pass it. I'm not going to partake when it comes to me. And they would partake when it came to them, eventually. And they eventually just went back to the same pattern of behavior, influenced by the same group of people that had helped them fail before. They had zero chance of having a positive influence and an almost guaranteed chance of being negatively influenced. And we all have situations like that. Places that are our Achilles heel, relationships, contexts, settings, where if I go there, I know I got almost zero chance of being a positive influence and a 99.9% chance of being negatively influenced. I got those kind of situations. It's like, I just can't go there. I can't try to help that person. I can't try to be a friend to that. I can't. And sometimes it's just a relationship too. When it's like, friends and family say, when you're around that person, you're a completely different person. You should stop being around that person. That person is not helping you, and you are not helping them. Let them go. Let someone else help them. Pray for them. But these are the kinds of things I'm talking about. Now, here's the thing. This principle, this notion of being aware of our limitations, being aware that there are some people and some groups and some situations where we just don't have the capacity to be a positive influence, that's in tension with some of the things that Jesus taught us. Lot's story is in tension with Jesus' example of being a friend to sinners. Because the Bible makes it clear, Jesus hung out with the quote unquote bad people. He hung out with the folks that were doing the bad stuff. He went to their house. He had dinner with them. He invited them to have dinner with him. He made friends with them. He invited some of them to be part of his inner circle. And that's in tension. Jesus' example and call to us to be a friend of sinners is in tension with Lot's pitching his tent near Sodom. And one of the ways that some people resolve that, and some churches resolve that, is to say we got to have a silo. We'll be in the world, but not of the world. We'll be there, but we're going to put a layer of bubble wrap, and we're going to put a wall around us, and we're going to make sure that those bad people out there don't influence us and our families in here. We're going to have a whole separate subculture that has as little to do with those folks as possible. We'll be the shining city on the hill, but you better be like us before you get inside the gates. Jesus' teaching and example completely disallows that. We don't get to do it that way. But the other way we don't get to do it is just, woohoo! We'll just join in with everything and do whatever they do, and we'll have fun, and we'll be just like they are, and there won't be any difference between us and them. That's what Lot did. We also don't get to do, we can do either one of those things. It just doesn't work well. And doesn't work out well. The middle course is much more challenging, which is prayer and discernment. And that we pray and we talk with God and we talk with people that know us and love us best, and we say, what about this person? What about that situation? What about that relationship? Because I feel like, I feel like I can have an impact there. And sometimes God and our friends that know us and love us will say, yeah, go for it. And sometimes they'll say, you know what? I don't think you will. I think you will just get dragged down. I think you won't make them better. I think they'll make you worse. And that's the route that we have. The difficult route of prayerfully discerning. Can I have an impact? Can I be an influence? Or will I simply be dragged down in that situation, in that circumstance? And we ask ourselves in prayer with them, to what degree can I keep my focus on Jesus and His call in any given situation? There are some situations I will not put myself in. God bless the people that are in them. They need to know that they need someone to go and tell them that Jesus loves them. They need someone to go and be their friend without manipulating and exploiting them. But there are some situations where I am just not going to be able to be that person, because if I go there, I'm done. I'm done. That's why it's great that we're part of the body, because other people can go there and they'll be all right. I can go places they can't. I can go to a bar, I can have a drink, and it's going to be all right. But there are places that I can't go and that I won't go. And there's some folks, I got good friends that are like, they'll never take me to a bar. I can never be a good, positive man. To what degree can we keep our focus on Jesus in any given situation? I want to close with another concrete modern day example. Someone you might have heard this name a lot recently, particularly if you follow the news a lot. Maria Corina Machado. Have you heard that name? I love that. I don't know that. I love that. Love that name. Maria Corina Machado is the most recent recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. She just received it a couple weeks ago. She could not go pick it up herself because she is currently in hiding. Most of her allies don't even know where she is. She is a citizen of Venezuela, and she, like every other person in the world, was given the opportunity and the choice. Do you want to get along to go along, or go along to get along, or are you going to stand against something in the culture that is negative? Can you be an influence here? And she chose to be that. She grew up in a wealthy family. It would have been easy enough to just kind of go along and use the wealth to gain political favor and curry political favor. For whatever reason, she chose not to do. Well, not for whatever reason. She has said her faith is one of the reasons she's doing what she's doing. She's a staunch Catholic and deeply committed to God and to prayer. She's also an industrial engineer, very well educated. She's also a competent and capable business person who was convinced to go into politics. Politics is one of those places where I don't think I could ever survive. I'm not, just saying. I think I would be too easily corrupted. She has not been. She's been threatened. She's had her life threatened. She's had her family threatened. She's been accused of multiple crimes. Last year in 2024, she was going to run for president. There was an election. She was going to run for president of Venezuela against Maduro, a dictator, president in name, dictator in fact, and the Maduro regime declared it illegal for her name to even be on the ballot. So she convinced an old guy to run as her proxy. Everyone knew that a vote for this guy was not a vote for him, but was a vote for Machado. You know what percentage of the popular vote she got running when she wasn't allowed to run? 90%. 90% of the popular vote. And she lives in hiding. And she still lives in hiding. And she still prays for her people. She still speaks. She still leads. She does a lot on social media now, and she's still convinced that one day democracy and freedom will return to Venezuela. But she's choosing, at great risk to herself and to her family, she's choosing to be an influencer rather than simply to be influenced. And I think she's a tremendous example. Someone going into an environment that for many people would be corrupting. And for her, she's being an influencer. This is the choice that we all have. Most of us probably will not have an opportunity to run for president in a country struggling against dictatorship. Most of us probably not going to have an opportunity to win a Nobel Peace Prize, although I think Aiden might win one. Maybe. You could. You could. I feel like you could. Yeah. I do think this, that although the scale of impact open to most of us is much smaller than that of Eric Liddell or Machado or even Lot, but we all have this opportunity to be an influencer in our family, in our school, in our place of work, in our community, in our county, to influence folks for good, to see how can I be a blessing in this situation? How can I help others? How can I lift others up? How can I be a shield and a protection for folks that are vulnerable and are in need? How can I do those things? Versus how can I just adopt the values around me and get along and go along and get what's best for myself, and who cares about everybody else? We have that choice, to be an influencer or to be influenced. In Jesus' name, let's choose to be influencers. Amen. Amen.